You've been calling yourself lazy for years now. Maybe it started as a joke. Maybe it started as something you said before anyone else could say it about you. Either way, it's stuck.
And now when you sit down after work and can't bring yourself to do the thing you said you'd do, the thing you actually want to do, you just think lazy. When you stare at your phone for 20 minutes instead of starting the project that matters to you, you think lazy.
When you can't muster the energy to be excited about the opportunity you fought for, you think lazy. But here's the thing, you're not lazy. You're just tired of pretending. You're tired of pretending the meeting could have been an email.
You're tired of pretending you're passionate about synergy. You're tired of nodding enthusiastically when someone says, "Let's circle back," as if that phrase has ever meant anything to anyone. You're tired of performing interest in things that don't interest you, and performing gratitude for feedback that wasn't helpful, and performing energy you stopped feeling somewhere around Tuesday.
You're performing agreement when someone shares an idea you know won't work but isn't worth the political cost of questioning. You're performing availability by answering messages at night, not because the work is urgent, but because not answering would seem like you don't care.
And you're performing optimism constantly about timelines that were unrealistic from the start, and goals that keep changing, and initiatives that will be quietly abandoned in 4 months when someone else has a different idea. None of this is on your job description, but all of it is required.
You can do your actual job. That's not the problem. The problem is doing your actual job while also managing everyone's perception of how you're doing your actual job.
It's the emotional labor of making sure your tone sounds collaborative in the email. It's the mental load of remembering who's sensitive about what so you can navigate around it. It's the constant low-level vigilance of appearing motivated, engaged, and fine when you are none of those things.
And then you go home and people ask why you're so tired. You didn't even do anything physical. You just sat at a desk, you just attended meetings, you just sent emails. How hard could it be?
Incredibly hard, as it turns out. Because you've been spending energy you don't have on things that don't matter, and saving nothing for the things that do. Here's what nobody tells you about modern work. The job is doable. The performance of the job is unsustainable. And somewhere along the way, we all agree to pretend we don't notice the difference.
We agree to act like it's normal to be passionate about quarterly targets. We agree to act like feedback sessions are about growth and not about justifying decisions already made. We agree to act like we're building something meaningful together when we're really just trying to make it through the week without anyone being upset with us. You're not lazy for being tired of that. You're just human. You didn't used to be this way. That's the part that's easy to forget. There was a time when you cared without having to remind yourself to care, when showing up didn't require a pep talk, when you had opinions that weren't calculated for how they'd be received.
It didn't disappear all at once. It was slow. So slow you didn't notice it happening. A little more performance here, a little more accommodation there, a little more swallowing your actual reaction and replacing it with the appropriate one.
And at each step it made sense, it was reasonable, it was professional. But somewhere in all that reasonableness, the part of you that responded naturally got buried under the part that responds correctly.
You didn't stop caring because you're broken. You stopped caring because you cared too much for too long, without anyone noticing, and without anything changing. The cruelty of it is how personal it feels. When you can't make yourself care about the project anymore, you think there's something wrong with you. When you can't bring yourself to volunteer for the extra initiative, you think you're not ambitious enough. When you feel nothing during the motivational all-hands meeting, you think you've lost your spark. But you haven't lost anything. You're just running on empty because you've been using your energy to care on command. And that's not how caring works. Caring isn't something you can perform indefinitely. Enthusiasm isn't something you can fake forever. At some point, your body just stops cooperating. It stops giving you the energy to pretend.
And that's not failure. That's preservation. Here's what's actually happening. You've been operating in emotional overdraft. You've been spending energy you didn't have yet, borrowing it from tomorrow, then the day after that. And when tomorrow finally comes, you're starting in the red, so you borrow again.
The interest on that debt isn't financial,
It's numbness. It's the feeling of being unable to feel. It's the inability to rest even when you have time, because rest requires you to stop running. And if you stop running, you'll have to admit how far behind you actually are. The strangest part is how it changes you without you noticing. Somewhere along the way, you stop knowing what you actually want. Not in the big existential sense, in the small daily sense.
Someone asks what you want for dinner, and you don't know. Someone asks what you want to do this weekend, and you can't think of anything. It's not that you don't have preferences, it's that accessing them requires energy you don't have.
So you just defer. You go along. You say, I'm fine with whatever, and you mean it. Because wanting something feels like too much work. Your desires didn't disappear. They just went quiet. And after a while, you forget they were ever loud. That's what pretending does. It doesn't just exhaust you. It erases you.
What makes it worse is that everyone around you seems fine. Your coworkers are performing competence. Your LinkedIn feed is performing success. No one is saying out loud that they're exhausted, so you assume it's just you.
But here's the thing about pretending. It only works if everyone does it, and everyone is. You're all performing for each other and silently concluding that you're the only one faking it.
Productivity culture needs you to believe that if you're tired, it's because you're doing something wrong. You're not optimizing your morning routine. You're not setting better boundaries. You're not practicing enough gratitude. The problem is never the structure. The problem is always you. What you're calling laziness is actually a pretty rational response to an irrational situation.
Your body is trying to protect you from something your mind hasn't admitted yet. That you can't keep this up. That something has to give. That you're tired not because you're weak, but because you're trying to be strong in a way that no one can sustain.
You're tired of smiling when you're not happy. You're tired of being responsive when you need space. You're tired of acting like everything is fine when it's not fine, but also not bad enough to justify complaining. So you just exist in this gray zone of fine-ish and tell yourself that everyone feels this way. And that's the trap. It's not bad enough to leave. It's not good enough to love. It's just ambiguous enough that any complaint sounds like whining, because technically, nothing is wrong. You have a job. You're paying your bills. You're doing what you're supposed to do.
So what exactly are you upset about? You can't even articulate it without sounding ungrateful. And that inability to name it keeps you stuck in it. Because if you can't explain what's wrong, you can't justify changing it. So you stay. And the staying costs you a little more each day.
Here's the real problem. Leaving feels irresponsible, like you're giving up or being dramatic or not trying hard enough. Staying feels deadening, like you're disappearing a little more with every day you perform enthusiasm you don't feel.
And waiting feels endless because nothing is going to change unless you change it. But changing it requires energy you're spending just to get through the day. So you're trapped, not by force, by inertia. And there's no villain, just a situation that doesn't work, in a version of yourself that's too tired to imagine what would.
Maybe the thing to do is just stop calling it laziness, because it isn't. It never was. You're tired because you've been working 2 jobs, the one you're paid for, and the one where you convince everyone, including yourself, that you're fine.